Bruce, thank you very much for joining us on the Outside and Active podcast. How are you doing?
Great, thanks, Dominic. Yeah, fantastic.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I'm really excited to get into your running career and all of the things that you're doing now. But first up, I'm going to offer you a piece of advice from a previous podcast guest, and our listeners will know what this is all about, but they leave a piece of advice for someone that will be coming up on the podcast. They don't know who it's for, so you can take it in however way you want. And this piece of advice comes from a lady called Hannah Beecham, who over in the UK has set up a campaign called Red January, which gets people active during January, builds a community, tries to get people doing something every single day, which will then set them up to have a sustainable, active lifestyle after that. So it's a great campaign. And her piece of advice for you is to start small and realistic and enjoy where the journey takes you from there. So the question that kind of leads on from that is, are you someone that starts a project or sets out in, with a realistic mindset, or are you someone that if you're going to set your mind to something, you're going to go big and hard?
No. So I probably follow that advice. And by the way, it's particularly apt advice because I was at school in England in the 1960s, and I happen to remember that January is not a great month to start outdoors. I should point out for people who are listening that I watched on television as a young schoolboy. I watched England win the only Football World Cup that they ever have won in 1966 in black and white. We didn't have color TVs in those days. And so they made Germany play in white and England play in reds so that you could see the contrast between the dark jerseys. I definitely follow that advice with everything I do because I'm cautious. And I think my sport running, is always about being cautious. So when I started off almost without knowing it, I did exactly the right thing. My very first run that I ever ran on with a view to running the Comrades Marathon in South Africa, which is a 90K race a year later. My first run was 10 minutes. I ran for 10 minutes and I got it right. And at the moment, I can tell you, because I'm using the same advice, I broke my leg the other day. I slipped on we have a beautiful tree in Johannesburg called a jacaranda tree, which has beautiful purple blossoms. But when they fall off and they get wet in our thunderstorms here in Johannesburg, they become like ice. And I slipped on some and broke my leg, and I'm back again. But at the moment I'm walking. And next week, at the end of next week, I will allow myself to jog a little bit, walk a little bit, jog a little bit, walk a little bit, and then gradually get back to running properly again. But I know that's kind of 12 weeks, but I'm not impatient. And then last thing, I probably spent too long answering the question, but the way I have run all my races in my life, every single one of my races, and my credo for racing is to start like a coward and finish like a hero. So you start cautiously and you finish strongly. And if you start cautiously, you will always finish strongly.
I really like that. I like that.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to go into, you've mentioned the Comrades there and all of the other races that you've been a part of, but we'll kick off with another staple question, which is, what do you love about being outside and active?
Well, living in South Africa, of course, outside is absolutely essential. It's just fantastic. I mean, if I look at Johannesburg, our winter lasts about 3 months. And it's pretty cold. We get icy cold. I remember it snowed here once, September the 10th, 1981. It snowed. But the rest of the time is, it's just glorious to be outdoors. And I'm an outdoors person, so when I'm not running, my favorite pursuit is going to the bush, going to places like the Kruger National Park, and just feeling contentment looking at an elephant or a lion on a kill or something like that. I'm going again next month for 5 days. But more particularly when I run, I like to follow the seasons, be the first one who hears the first cuckoo of spring, be the one who hears the last cuckoo of autumn. And particularly, I do a lot of writing and a lot of speech making. I've got a speech this evening that I've got to give. And when I'm out there running, I'm very creative. And so I write my speeches and my articles, and even a book that I've written, much of it is written while I'm running in my head.
It's interesting. I mean, South Africa's a beautiful country. Joburg is lovely. At the Kruger National Park, I've been there quite a few times, all around different parts of South Africa, Zimbabwe and Tanzania, and it's a lovely part of the world. But you also, were you born in Hong Kong and you spent time in the UK as well? So where does your heart kind of lie with? Obviously, you're in Joburg now.
Yeah, I'm the child of the planet. I was born in Hong Kong because my father. I'm a very famous regiment that you guys will know. My father was a Gurkha officer. He was an officer in the Gurkha regiment, and he's sadly no longer with us. But at the Queen's funeral, I noticed that one of the regiments that marched at her funeral was the Gurkhas, and I know he would have had a tear in his eye. And then I spent early days of my youth growing up in Malaya, as it was in those days, Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaya, Singapore. My father was involved in campaigns in Brunei and Sarawak and Borneo in a war in those days called the War of the Running Dogs, 1960s, around then. And so he was then posted back to the UK. He was posted to Sandhurst to teach jungle warfare because he was an expert on jungle warfare, which is an interesting thing. Wow. Because my grandfather was the postmaster of a little town. It's called a little dorpie in the Free State called Ladybrand, which is kind of open and flat top mountains and the opposite of jungle. But anyway, he became an expert on jungle warfare. So because of that, he went back to Sandhurst to lecture. And so I went to school at King's School, Canterbury, for 5 years in the 1960s, which is why I was fortunate enough to see England win the last 1966. Yeah, I can name the whole team.
Well, an amazing experience, and particularly relevant now whilst the World Cup is on and taking place in Qatar. Wow, that is interesting.
I've got 3 lines on my chest, so I hope you bring it home. But
I mean, we've been saying that for since 1966.
Your ladies did the other day. Your women did.
Yes, they did. They won the Euros.
Yeah.
So hopefully they can follow the men's team can follow on. But amazing. Yeah. And where you're at now.
By the way, you're not going to beat us at rugby on Saturday.
Is it on Saturday? No.
It's Saturday. No. Well, it's not going to happen.
Well, we only just drew with the Kiwis, so.
Well, drawing with the Kiwis is. They're kind of continually the number one team in the world. Our great rivalry is New Zealand, South Africa at rugby.
Yeah, the Tri-Nations. Oh, amazing. Well, there's another competitive element to it. So back to your running. You're sitting here and you've run over 150 ultra marathons, which is unbelievable. But where did it start? Where did you realise that you had an interest in running? I know you tried out, what other different sports did you try out? And why did running really fit with you? And where did you realise it was good?
I've loved all sport. I love playing pop, but I just found that I used to get frustrated in team sports because you try your guts out on this side of the field and the other guy goes to sleep and now the opposition score a goal or a try. I was absolutely useless at cricket. Though I love cricket, I love watching it, but I've realized in later years that I was short-sighted. For a long time at school, I was short-sighted, didn't know I was. I could never sit at the back of the class. I sat at the front to read the blackboard, but I didn't know why at those days. So I never saw the cricket ball. And then amazingly, I was a passionate rugby player, scrum half, number 9, but I was just too small, the number 9s now, it's supposed to be the smallest position on the field. They're all enormous. Mm. Yeah, and football, I was great. You want me in your team, but yeah, I just don't, just didn't have those skills. But what I noticed was that no matter how long a game went on, I never got tired. And then when we had school athletics day, and the teacher would tell me, in my days at school, Fordyce, you're doing the mile, or you're doing the 880 yards. Or here in South Africa, you're doing the 1,500 meters, Fordyce, you're doing the 5,000 meters. I would complain, and then I would do quite well at it. And school cross country, in my final 2 years, I won the school cross country. But my school that I went to in South Africa was a school for hippies and poets and creative people and artists. Yeah. So to beat them was no great achievement. Didn't mean you're going to be, kind of like world class or whatever. But the Comrades Marathon is a massive event in South Africa. I'm trying to think what the equivalent would be. And it would be like the London Marathon, but it's much older. And it's the whole, so it would be like watching the Wimbledon final or people who are not interested in tennis will watch the Wimbledon final. And people who are not interested in sport will watch the Comrades Marathon, because it's 12 hours of live television on that day.
Oh, wow.
And even the grannies who are not interested in sport will get up at 5:30 in the morning, make tea and breakfast, and spend the whole day in front of the television watching, from the winners who do it in 5.5 hours to the person who beats the final tragic, horrible cutoff gun, which fires at exactly 5.5 hours. They will watch that whole day of drama, mainly because all of us know somebody who's running, or have run it, or intend to run it, or are involved in some way. The country kind of comes to a standstill for Comrades Day. And so that got into my system, and I just thought there were a few things that happened simultaneously to spark my interest. Was one, I'd been at university for a couple of years and done nothing, and I'd got lazier and lazier. Well, I did what all students do. I drank heavily, partied, chased the opposite sex unsuccessfully, and did enough work to pass my degree each year so that I could come back. And I'm an archaeologist, so I studied archaeology, and I taught archaeology at Wits University, which is in Johannesburg. And then I saw the Comrades Marathon on television. Amazingly, South Africa only got television in 1976, because the nationalist government in those days did not want us to see television programs where black and white people got on together happily. They didn't want us to get the propaganda of real life.
Yeah.
And so they held it at bay as long as they could, but in the end it cracked in 1976. And I watched the Comrades Marathon on television. They didn't show it live in those days, but they showed a half-an-hour version of the race 2 weeks later. And when I watched that inspired me. Not seeing Alan Robb, who won that year. I didn't know that a few years later he and I would be bitter rivals on the road, but I never thought he was like godlike to win the race. But it was more the ordinary people who were finishing. I was thinking, well, that guy can make it. I can definitely make it. And then at the same time, my girlfriend broke up with me. Oh, lovely lady, Elaine. And so I had suppressed libido, so I might as well run. And then unfortunately, I got caught in a thing called the June 16th Soweto riots, which was the pupils, the students in Soweto were protesting against having to be taught all their lessons in Afrikaans, so-called language of the oppressor. Though actually Afrikaans is a beautiful language and it's an African language, but they were forced to, and so there were riots and demonstrations going on, and people were killed. And June the 16th is always a massively symbolic day in South Africa, because that's the day. And so as a passionate student, myself, a whole bunch of us students, and I was included, decided we were going to march in solidarity with them. And as we started our march, we got smashed to pieces by the police. So I needed to have a project to do, to have some kind of control of my destiny. That's it. And so I started, as I said, I ran for 10 minutes around my university rugby fields, and I did it at night in case anyone saw me. And that was the start.
And then it grew and grew till you took part. What's the entry process like for running?
Entry pro? No, I mean massive. It's massive in South Africa. So Comrades Marathon entries opened yesterday, and 6,000 are already gone. Wow. For a 90-kilometer race. And our season is geared around that. We genuinely, I mean, that sounds a bit, I don't mean to sound arrogant, but finishing a marathon, so what? You finish a marathon as a qualifier for Comrades. You have to run a marathon in under 4 hours and 50 minutes, a standard 26-mile marathon. And the whole, from January onwards, the whole build-up is designed to bring you, the runner, to a state of readiness by June the 11th for the race, which will be June the 11th this year. And it gradually builds up in distance. So our other very famous race is the Two Oceans, which is in Cape Town, and it's called the Two Oceans because it starts on the one side, you're on the Indian Ocean, and by the time you finish, you're on the Atlantic Ocean side of Cape Town. And that's 56 kilometers, so that's a 35-miler. And all of those are stepping stones taking you to Comrades.
It's interesting you spoke about earlier that it was part of almost the culture of, like you said, old grannies that don't have an interest in sport will watch it. And it's sort of like what you said about London Marathon over here, is that people put it on because they know someone that's in it. But like I said, that's a 44-kilometer race, a 26-mile race. This is an ultra marathon, which takes everything to a new level. Ultra marathon running is different in terms of...
So I mean, there are ultra marathons that are longer than Comrades. There are ultra marathons that are tougher than Comrades, but Comrades is a blend of. It has a magic to it. First of all, it's 100 years old. Secondly, it's brutal. So it's plus minus 90 k's. It changes every year because of roadworks and alterations on the way. But call it 90 kilometers. It's brutal. The hills are horrendous. It's usually run in intense heat, even though it's winter. It's KwaZulu-Natal. That's a subtropical province. It's the Zulu province. So and then it's very rich in tradition, and I think that's what makes it so special. It changes direction every year. So one year it is up from the city of Durban to the city of Pietermaritzburg. That's the up run. This next year's run is down from Pietermaritzburg to Durban.
Didn't realize it switched.
Yeah. And if you can't call yourself a proper Comrades Marathons runner until you've done it in both directions. So they give you if you do it in both directions, they give you what's known as the back-to-back medal. That means you've gone up and you've gone down, or you've gone down and you've gone up. Then there is a tradition of green numbers. Every runner who runs it 10 times is given a number forever that is colored green. And that number is retired. That is your number forever. So my number is 2403. I would kill if I saw anyone else wearing 2403.
Wow.
Some of the numbers in Comrades become very famous. And then when you've done 20, you get a double green. When you've done 30, which I've done, you get a triple green. But the person who's done the most, Barry Holland, has done 48 Comrades. He will get a quintuple green, not next year, but he'll get it in 2024. The start is the most emotional. I mean, I think any runner who's ever been, the start of the Comrades starts with our national anthem, of course, is Sikaleli Africa. Then it has a working song called Shosholoza that everybody sings, Shosholoza, and they sing that song. Then we have Chariots of Fire.
Really?
Plays Chariots of Fire. Yeah, and then the race has started with a cockerel crow by a man called Max Trimborn, and I'm not going to try and do it, but it's kind of, he's twice. He died in 1985, but they recorded it. And when you hear the cockerel crow twice, you know you're going. And it's a very symbolic moment, because immediately after the cockerel crow, a cannon fires, bang, and then you're off. And it's gun to gun. It's not chip to chip. So if you're at the back, and the other thing, it's not your normal ultra marathon. I love ultra marathons, which is kind of for the lunatic fringe. This is 20,000 people. So it's almost the size. It looks like a London Marathon or a New York Marathon when it sets off. And then the final thing, and the other traditions, but the final most brutal tradition is that the race ends at 5:30 in the afternoon, because it's winter. It ends as it's getting dark. And they don't care if and it finishes in a stadium. On the down run, it finishes in a stadium called Moses Mbida, up run Scottsville. And a person is selected, it's been me one year, and you turn your back on the runners who are coming in, you turn your back, and the official does this to you. And then you fire a gun. And if a person is one step from the finish line, it's so sorry, congratulations, come back next year. You're not a finisher. It's brutal. And that is it. That's probably the biggest tradition of all. And the whole country comes to a standstill. People throw things at their televisions, because here comes this poor woman with a gammy leg, and she's just come into the stadium, and she's got a minute and a half to get round, and she's struggling, and the crowd's going mad. And then they show you the guy's getting the gun ready. He's raising it up in the air, and here she comes. Bang, sorry, you didn't make it. Or bang, you did make it. You just crashed across the line inside. But that's the most dramatic. I think that's probably the most dramatic part of it.
It's all of those things you've mentioned: the cockerel, the songs leading up to it, the fact that there's 20,000 race entrants, the gunfire at the end that make it, and the fact that it's been long-standing. There's a huge amount of tradition that makes it amazing. It really is.
100-year history of the race. We haven't had 100 runs, because it was cancelled during the Second World War for about 4 years. And then, don't even get me on the subject, I get so angry, but we lost 2 years because of, I don't say COVID, we lost 2 years because of lockdown. Yeah. Which was disgraceful. But anyway, we didn't have a race. So we're back. And this will be the second since then.
And this will be the 96th.
100th running will be in about 3 years' time.
Amazing. And in terms of your accomplishments with it, I mean, you've won it more than anyone else, 9 times, 8 times being in a row. I mean, I bet the people running up next to you, your competitors, were thinking, well, there's no point because he's gonna win. But then you've also been helping to organize it, the after parties. How did you start to get further involved? Is it just because you are a standout runner that you get more involved?
I could not be there on the day. So at the moment, what I'm doing is I'm part of the TV commentary team. And I've had, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but we've had good feedback about how good our commentary team is, because one of the runners, Kuan Walker, knows everything about every runner, every detail. The other one, Mosibodi Whitehead, is just so enthusiastic. He's just incredible. And then I know where they are on the course because I know the course so well. So if they're running this year, there's a place called 45th Cutting, which is one of the hills near the end. And I told the whole country, listen, I said, Tepe Jijani, who's the guy, he's the runner who won it. I said, when he gets to the crash barrier, he's going to change gear and sprint watch because this is his last chance to get away. And it was like I called the race because that's exactly what he did. But I know the tactics. I know, and he looked so strong. I knew he's going to win it. And then it just. Wow, I can wax lyrical about Comrades all the time because it brings out all the best in people. And for many years, it showed South Africans what South Africa could be, in terms of a multicultural, multiracial, men and women all striving together. There was Comrades showing us what we could be and how incredible we are when we're all striving for a common goal, which is to beat that final cut-off gun. Yes, in the front of the race, the runners are racing each other and it's as intense as any other race. But even then, I'm trying to think, one of your rivals misses his sponge when he goes through a seconding table. You will hand him a sponge, that's just the spirit of Comrades. And by the way, our tables are the best in the world. On race day, you can ask, there are probably about 750,000 spectators on the road, and they all do what you call a barbecue, but a barbecue is a really watered down version of what we do.
Right.
We braai. And braai is just, I'm even saying it with the Afrikaans accent, that braai is just different from a barbecue.
It is.
Barbecue, I think of some little like hamburger patties. The braai is chops and boerewors, which is and so that whole race, the whole way down, people are braaiing. People are drinking beer, people are screaming and shouting encouragement, and they don't go. They tape off their area on the side of the road a week before. That's our area, that's where we're sitting, that's where we're putting our braai. So I've been a spectator on the road and I've participated, and I now have a legendary after party on the Monday after the race, which you have to be pretty strong to come to that because. But the runners come in and it's so wonderful because they all wear their medals and they're limping. And because everybody limps, especially after a down run, you limp. And they all come in and it's just a party. But what we do is if you feel like telling your story and tell people what happened, you can tell people how your day went, what you did. And some of the stories, I mean, I can tell you this here, I don't have to give the lady's name away, but she said, here's my medal. And by the way, the Comrades medal is the smallest, most pathetic medal in the world. It's tiny compared to I've got a London Marathon medal. I've got a Boston medal. The Comrades medal's tiny. It's like your 1 pound piece. But it's the understatement of the thing because I've also seen a Victoria Cross. And the Victoria Cross is very understated. It's tiny little dark bronze medal with a purple maroon ribbon. That's it. Sometimes the understatement is more. Anyway, this lovely lady, she told us a story. She said, and this was, I'll try and do it as quickly as I can. She said, when I woke up in rehab, having been rescued, not in rehab, in ICU. When I woke up in ICU, having been brought back to life for the 3rd time for a massive drug overdose, I had one message on my cell phone. It was from my drug dealer telling me that he had some really good stuff for me to take if I got hold of him. Not one message from my family, not one message from my loved ones, nothing, because I'd stolen from them, lied to them, blah, blah, blah. We all know the story of an addicted person. She said, but today, this morning, the morning after I finished Comrades Marathon, and she's clean, she got herself clean. She said, the morning after I finished Comrades Marathon, I've got 335 messages.
Wow.
That was her story, so,
Beautiful.
those are and then the funniest one, which I can't do because it takes 15 minutes and it will take up a whole, the funniest one comes from an English guy, about an English guy who what happened, it was the funniest, I tell it every year, I wish I could remember his name. He came to get a silver medal. We also have different colored medals for different times.
Yeah.
So if you run London, you get a standard medal. That's your medal, whatever. We have a medal for top 10 get gold. 7.5 hours you get silver. All the bronze medal for 11. Anyway, he came to get a silver medal, and he was all ready, and he was in A batch. He was starting in A batch, and I don't want to spoil the whole story, but just as the cockerel crowed and the gun went, somebody trod on the back of his heel, and his shoe came off. And it's how he tried to get his shoe back. While A batch are the Springboks, they go through.
Yeah.
B batch are the wildebeest. Those are slightly bigger and heavier, and they go through, and they're hitting you out the way when you're trying to get your shoe. And after the wildebeest, C and D and E batch, those are the buffaloes. They're boom, boom.
Yeah.
And finally, the last two batches go through, and those are the elephants. Anyway, it's how one of the elephants found his shoe for him. It's the funniest. Anyway, that's our after party. So,
amazing. Can you give us an idea of what the course is like in terms of beauty, elevation, terrain?
Okay, so you drop 1,500 meters if you're running down. So you start in what we call the high veld. High veld is open grassland, kind of like acacia trees and things like that. So I'm going to do a down run because it's next year's down. But the odder thing about the down run is for the first 50 Ks you run up. It feels like that. All you ever do is run up. And the hills are, I don't know, because I'm trying to think of a similar race in the rest of the world. But Heartbreak Hill, I've run Boston. Heartbreak hurts. At 20 miles, you hit 3 hills in a row called the Heartbreak Hills, the Newton Hills in Boston. They hurt because you've been running so fast when you get there. But if they were in Comrades, none of them would have a name. Because the hill, on the up run, there's a hill called Polly Shorts, which is named after a farmer who lived there called Polly Benton Short. Polly Shorts is 2 kilometers long. So it's 1 mile of solid uphill straight, but you start it when you get to 80 Ks. And then you go up in the middle of the race, there's a hill called Inchanga, which is Zulu for blade of a knife. And that is, also 2 Ks straight up. No mercy. The hills are brutal. But the descents, you see, it's the downhills as well, because they smash your legs to pieces running down there. So if you do the down run, you do obviously eventually lose height, but you lose height in the last 30 Ks. The first 60 are uphill or flat, and then the best word for it is you plummet down to the Indian Ocean, and your legs that have been softened up and tenderized by plus minus 50, 60 Ks of running now have to slam into the ground. You lose all your toenails. I don't want to put people off, but toenails are for sissies, and then eventually you, from the top of a place called Fields Hill, you can look into the distance and you can see the Indian Ocean. It's like gleaming there with the skyline of Durban, and some idiot will say, "We're nearly there, guys," and you've got 21 Ks to go. You've got half marathon.
You can see it.
When you get to 10 Ks to go, the same idiot will say, "Let's sprint."
Is that you? Are you the idiot that says let's sprint?
No. I have deep respect for that race.
It sounds beautiful, just in terms of everything about it.
So it's a mixture of everything. I mean, it's urban. When you finish, you're in a major African city, Durban. Even Pietermaritzburg is quite a big town. But in the middle, you run through an area called the Valley of 1,000 Hills, which is truly beautiful. We have a famous author called Alan Paton who wrote a book called Cry the Beloved Country, and he wrote about the rolling hills of the Valley of 1,000 Hills. And you look down at them, and these valleys are full of homesteads and settlements and people who live down there with little wisps of smoke coming up, and there's a big river that goes through it called the Umgeni, which, by the way, is another hysterical event that we do in South Africa called the Doozy. The Umzinduzi is a small river that flows into the Umgeni, and you can paddle all the way from Pietermaritzburg to Durban. You finish in the Indian Ocean, and it takes 3 days, and I've done 10 of those. So you have to do the Doozy, and so you paddle. But the ridiculous thing about the Doozy is at times, in order to be quicker, you can run over a mountain carrying your boat rather than paddle around. So the river will take a long, lazy bend round, but it's quicker to run over. So I have a photograph of myself running past through a kraal, past a little mud hut with a thatched roof, with a man smoking his pipe, sitting on a paint tin, and a pig next to him and a dog. And the river's 5 kilometers away, and I'm running with my mate. We're running carrying a double with our paddles in our hand. And you think, well, but anyway, that's a doozy. So you look down at the Valley of 1,000 Hills. Yeah, that's beautiful. And then there's you see the race, I forget the traditions, but as you go through the Valley of 1,000 Hills and you're running, there's a huge embankment that goes for about 2 kilometers, and on that embankment are shields and plaques of anyone who's ever run the race. You can put your name up there. And so there are all these shields with people's names on it. So Dominic, and your race number, 1754, whatever it might be. And some of them are fantastic. Some of them have got human ash on them. Some of them have got flowers. Dad, we bought this for you because you love this race so much.
Wow.
And I always say to every novice when they're about to run their first Comrades, I say, go and have a look at the wall, because you can't put your name on it the day before. But the day afterwards, you can order it, and they put it up for you. So if I wax lyrical about Comrades, it's because it's just it's unique. I'm trying to think of the English equivalent. Would be something like the Grand National, the horse race.
Yeah.
Where only the English would have, I don't know what it is, 4 miles, where every single year a horse dies, and the horses are so exhausted at the end. Well, that's kind of like Comrades, We had 2 deaths this year.
Because of the hot weather as well, I imagine. And you have so many people taking part that I suppose aren't necessarily ready for it.
Yeah, look, that sounds like, I mean, look, there are many years that go past with no one dying, but we have a hospital tent at the end that's pretty busy. And I've been in there a couple of times myself. Mainly you get dehydrated, so they put you on a drip on an IV. And more often than not, you recover. I've learned the quickest way to recover after an ultra is to put your feet above your heart. So raise them on a pillow, put them above your heart, and it sends back the stale, unoxygenated blood back to your heart, and you recover quite quickly normally like that. But yeah, every year there are a few people who get hospitalized. I mean, it's 90 kilometers, and it's not always hot, by the way. I mean, some years it can be cold, but generally, because it's KwaZulu-Natal, it's hot.
You competed professionally for a number of years, and you've spoken about the beauty of this race of South Africa. But there was a time period where you couldn't compete internationally due to the apartheid policies in South Africa. It must have been incredibly difficult.
Yeah. So no, listen. One thing, I didn't compete professionally. There was no prize money. There was no sponsorship in my day. Nothing like that. You got a gold medal. So I'm strictly kind of back in the amateur days. But what did happen is, obviously, if you picked up a certain amount of notoriety or fame from winning the race, and I used to be in demand as a speaker, and I appeared in a couple of television adverts, that kind of stuff. So there was, but for the first part of my running career, I was still very much an academic at university teaching, or else a student getting my degree. And then we were, obviously, we were excluded from international sport most of the time because, South Africa was the polecat of the world with our apartheid policy, so we weren't at the Olympics, and we weren't playing the rugby and what. But I was able to get into the odd race running as a club runner for my university, so not representing my country. So I ran a race called the London to Brighton 3 times, which I ran for my university there, and I ran the US 50-mile champs in Chicago in 1984, again running in my university colors.
And I know that it affected, obviously, cricket and rugby, having interest in that sport. But it was something that you were campaigning against. You met Nelson Mandela during that time period as well. How was the impact? Obviously, it was a massive impact on the country, but what was your experience of that time?
Well, it was just a horrendous time. So, I mean, the 1981, they made the Comrades part of the apartheid government, 20-year celebration of them being in government. And they had a whole lot of tank parades and fly pasts and politicians lecturing us like they do now. Nothing's changed. I mean, globally. And then they made Comrades part of those celebrations. So in that particular race, I wore a black armband protesting against the fact that the race had associated itself with that. And it was a very unpopular winner. I had tomatoes and eggs thrown at me. In fact, I've just finished a piece writing about that race for a Dutch running magazine. And we were excluded, yeah. And then, you know, it came to an end in 1989, 1990. So I didn't meet Mandela in those days because he was very much still in jail on Robben Island, which is an island off Cape Town. But I met him afterwards, and what a forgiving, wonderful man. Yeah, just unbelievably gentle and kind soul, but with a determination in him that you could see. Yeah. But he always had a word for everybody. And I remember I missed a plane from running a race. I missed a plane flight from a place called Port Elizabeth to Johannesburg. I had missed it because I got to the airport too late. And the check-in lady said to me, "But you're very lucky because we've got a VIP who hasn't boarded yet, so you can board with him." And it turned out to be Mandela. So he and I walked out together across the tarmac to go to the plane. He, by the way, when you think of the overblown, how politicians think they're so important, he had one bodyguard with him. One bodyguard, and he sat in economy class on the plane. And we walked across the tarmac, and the plane, everybody had got on board except us two. So the people were looking out the window, and he was very tall and grey-headed, and I'm quite short. So we were walking out together, and he looked at me and he said, "Bruce, I bet all the people in the plane are asking each other, who's that funny old grey-headed guy with the famous Bruce Fordyce?" Yeah, it was quite a good one.
That is amazing. I mean, I went over to South Africa in 2014, just after his passing, along with a lot of the politicians from our country, and it was such a momentous occasion and very sad. But like you said there, the impact that individual had on a country was huge.
Yes, unbelievable.
And I really wanted to touch on something that you're doing now, and a massive thing. People from the UK will be well versed with Parkrun and know what Parkrun is. And you are a massive part of Parkrun existing in South Africa. What's your relationship with it, and how has that been going?
Yeah, well, and I'm absolutely loving it. It has given me such a sense of purpose. So, you know, you could say my running career, and you know, thanks for mentioning it, whatever. You could say that really was kind of selfish and for myself. I mean, obviously, if it probably did, but if it inspired some people to start running and people to run the Comrades Marathon, that's brilliant. But Parkrun is about giving back and about, I don't know, just it gives me such a sense of purpose. I'm already excited because I'm going to Parkrun on Saturday, and here we are, you know, talking. And so a lot of people don't know that, of course, with all things wonderful, including rugby, they're all South African. So Parkrun was started by Paul Sinton Hewitt, who's English and lives in the UK, but he went to Potchefstroom Boys High in South Africa. And he actually seconded me in the Comrades Marathon. He was a mate who gave me my drinks during one of my Comrades Marathon wins. And he started Parkrun in the UK. And we all know what a success it was. And I went across 2011 to run the London Marathon, and Paul persuaded me to run Bushy Parkrun the day before. And thank goodness he did, because I saw the magic with my wife, Jill, who also ran. And I think, I don't know, I was in my 50s, and what I found extraordinary, I ran 18 minutes and something, and I was 19th. I finished in 19th place. But Ginny, my wife, she's a much better runner now. She's trains quite often, but she wasn't really a runner in those days. And yet I saw her finish still with lots of people behind her. And we saw the magic. And so we said, we've got to start in South Africa, and we did. And to cut the story short, we started 2011. 26 people came. And now we have 1.3 registered park runners in South Africa, and we've only just skimmed the surface. You know, we're so passionate to get parkrun, particularly into the townships and into the rural areas, into disadvantaged areas where it can really make a massive difference. Because we have a lot of wonderful statistics in South Africa about what a wonderful country it is, but we have one unenviable one, and that is that we have the most number of heart attacks and those kinds of problems per capita than just about any other country in the world. So we're a very unfit, unhealthy, unwell country. And if Parkrun can do that, that's fantastic. But most importantly, I think we all know that Parkrun's about community. So that's also bringing communities together is invaluable. And one of the enviable statistics from Parkrun South Africa is that we were the first country to say you can walk. We don't care if you're a slow walker. We will wait for you. We will take your time. We will give you a result. And so that is something that Parkrun globally is trying to spread. We are proud of the fact, and I stand open to correction, but the UK average time for a parkrun is 29 minutes. We are proud of the fact that our average time is 43 minutes. That means we've got lots of people who are over an hour. And I slipped and broke my leg the other day, so I will be hobbling a parkrun at a place called Victoria Lake in Johannesburg on Saturday. I will probably take about an hour, and I won't be last, not by miles.
But you'll be doing it like a lot of other people, and that's what, like you said, that's what it's all about, and the impact that it's having on people's lives will be immeasurable.
Yeah, and so I'm well on my way to getting 500 parkruns, but I'm much proud of the fact that I've done more than 100 volunteer instances. It brings the volunteer spirit out of people, and how giving back, it just seems to be so rewarding.
Amazing, and I hope that continues to expand and gets adopted and will then continue across an amazing country.
Well, we would love to get it going into, up into Africa. We've got Zimbabwe screaming at us, Botswana screaming at us. You mentioned Tanzania; they're begging. So as soon as we get the go-ahead from the global head office, we can't wait to take it into Africa as well.
Exciting. And I'm going to ask a very boring English question about does the fact that it's in South Africa, are there ever any issues with animals around parkruns in certain areas?
Oh, we've got some buttes. Yeah, I actually wrote a piece on South Africa parkruns for the newsletter. Not obviously we have to be, safety is absolutely paramount, but you can't, keep all our animals away. So we've got beautiful photographs of people running with giraffe next to them. Hartbeespoort Dam Parkrun, there are zebras, impala, but then our favorite one. So I don't know how much time we've got left, but my favorite one is 1 December. We accidentally or somehow or other intercepted a message from a parkrun in Huddersfield, and the message was something like this. It said, "Come on, everybody! It's a beautiful winter's day. It's only -1 degree. There's no black ice. The sky is blue. There's no threat of snow. And somebody thinks they saw a badger. So you must come." Okay, so we replied because we were starting a parkrun in a township area very close to the Mozambique border called Nkomazi. And we were just starting our parkrun. So just cheekily we replied, and this was true. We said, "Come on, everybody. It's plus 35 degrees C. It's a beautiful day. It's not too humid. And we've got a great run through the township and through some sugarcane fields. And we've had to delay the start because the people coming from a place called Lower Sabi can't get past the 5 lions lying in the road." And then we waited, and we got a very rude message back from Huddersfield. I can't, because this is on radio, I can't tell you the words they said to us.
Yeah.
But I need to emphasize those lions were not in the park, they weren't on the parkrun route, but they were blocking the road for some of our volunteers who were coming there from inside a game reserve. So those are the kinds of things. Yeah, we sometimes get snakes. This is snake season now, and they're not adders, they're serious snakes, but very, very rarely. And I think probably the most beautiful thing is the wide range of parkruns that we have. But by the way, I've run in the UK. The last parkrun that I did in the UK was in the Outer Hebrides. in Stornoway, the capital there. It starts underneath a castle. It was too beautiful for words. So, the UK has fantastic parkruns, but we have everything from kind of urban to township. A township parkrun would be, to be honest, is ugly. There's litter.
Yeah.
There's a dead dog lying in the corner, a rusting bicycle. But the vibe is unbelievable because they all warm up to music, they all dance and sing, and now everybody runs. It's great, and a lot of the people walk. We can have a park run in the desert, like Aggeneys. We're in Namibia, so we've got a park run there in Swakopmund.
Wow.
You're in the desert where there's just quiver trees and silence and sand dunes, and you can be running. If you're on your own, if you're in a bit of a vacuum, you're not sure. The only thing you can hear is your own breathing. It's silent in a desert. So you've probably got a good feeling of what it would like to be on the moon. And then we have beautiful mountains, the Drakensberg mountains, which if you run there with that as a backdrop, it's beautiful. And then we have a lot of parkruns that run on beaches. So Melkbosstrand Parkrun, you run on the beach, which is firm sand, 2.5 Ks out, turn around, come back for 2.5 Ks. But there in front of you is this iconic view of Table Mountain. So you've got Table Mountain, you've got Cape Town in front of you. So yeah, I could go on about our parkruns, a full range of, well, a lot of people have said, South Africa, you have the whole world in one country. I think we almost do.
And just finally, before I ask you for your piece of advice, what are your objectives with running now? You're still running, you're still a big part of what you spoke about, Parkrun. Do you have something that you're working towards, or is it just being part of that community? So our whole aim is to leave the country a better place for, when I say our, I'm talking about all our whole team. On Saturday, we have our end of the year gathering of some of our ambassadors and people at Parkrun. That's to thank them, but also to thank them for what they're doing, is to leave South Africa a better, richer place because of Parkrun. My personal aim, but I have to be very quiet in case my family hears, is to be able to run forever. Until literally I can't run. One of the biggest gift I ever gave myself, and that would be my advice to somebody, is give yourself permission to be slow. People become too wrapped up in how fast they are. I've done that. I've had a couple of world records. I've done that. And I'm very proud of that chapter, but that chapter's closed if I'm slow. I just want to be out there, be part of it, to carry on running, and I'm going to keep on going forever, because the subject that I taught, archaeology, here basically from Johannesburg right up to the Red Sea is where humankind was born. So we as a species came out of Africa, and the earliest fossils and the earliest hominid records are all the way from here, all the way up to the Red Sea, and obviously through the famous sites in Kenya and in Ethiopia, Olduvai Gorge and those kind of places. But the one thing you get out of Africa is from the very earliest times, we were the best running animal on the planet. We're not as fast as a cheetah, and I've seen a cheetah at full speed. I've seen a cheetah kill a blesbok, which is quite a big antelope, and you've never in your life seen it smack. It just when it hits it, and it travels at speed to do it, but it can only sustain that for kind of 400, 600 meters, and then it's exhausted. So we can't run as fast as a cheetah, but we can run almost all day, as we can prove in races like the Comrades Marathon. We can run all day, and that is what we did as a hunter-gatherer species. In our earliest times on this planet, we hunted animals to exhaustion. We worked as teams, as communities, and we killed those animals with rocks and stones and with our bare hands and ate them. And that's why we are here, because we're the greatest running animal. Oh, we also sweat, which, that's a very special adaptation. And, we have these big brains that can make us think, and the most wonderful running limbs. And so that, for me, is my message. I need to keep on running until I just simply can't. And at that point, put one of my favorite Led Zeppelin albums on and let me slip quietly away. And it was really funny to read a small interview with you, where you said, yeah, I might be a really fast ultra marathon runner, but I'm also a 2:17 marathon runner, a sub 15 5K runner, and you know, it was kind of like, well, you know, we were actually pretty fast at all of the disciplines, not just ultras.
Yeah, so my friends knew how to tease me. My friends still know how to tease me. They can tease me as much as they like about ultras, and they can tell me, well, friends, you know, for instance, some of my friends, and my mother in particular, never forgave me for not winning 10 comrades. So they will go on at me for not winning 10. When I tell them 9's not bad, you know, they still will go on at me, but they don't get a reaction from me. But they get a reaction from me if they say, yeah, but Bruce, you were never fast. They get me every time, because I'll spin around and say, listen, 29 minutes for 10 Ks is not jogging, you know, or 2:17 for a marathon isn't jogging, or my PB for 5Ks was 13:39, but it was on a slight downhill course, so I don't count it. But I've got like a 14:20 on the track, which obviously is not going to terrify anyone of the top Kenyans or Ethiopians, but it's not jogging. No. So they would always get a reaction from me if they hit me on my screen. Yeah, I took the bait every time. Yeah.
Well, it's genuinely, as someone who loves that part of the world, whose parents got married in South Africa, it's been genuinely a pleasure and an honour to hear about this race, your love and passion for bringing Parkrun over there, and I greatly appreciate your time. So the final...
No, thank you. It's been a lot of fun, yeah.
The final thing from you that I'd like is, I mean, you've offered pieces of wisdom throughout this podcast, but one piece of advice that you would like to offer a guest that will be coming on in the future?
Wow. Gee, that's quite a tricky one. I think I would say to somebody, I think I would take that thing. Don't be afraid to be slow. Don't be afraid of ridicule, because you won't be ridiculed. Don't be afraid to be slow. Just go out there and do it. That would be it. Don't be afraid to be slow. Just go out there and do it.
Perfect.
And make it a lifetime commitment. Make it something that you say you will always be a runner.
Bruce, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Dominic. It was great. Thank you.